Societal wisdom would tell us that we all have a moral and fiduciary obligation to serve and protect our men and women in uniform when they come home. However, according to research from the Pew Research Center, we all have more work to do, the center reports. The government is missing the mark when it comes to meeting the needs of veterans today, with 30% saying that the government does a poor or inadequate job of meeting the changing needs of today, while only 46% say that the Department of Veteran Affairs is doing the job of meeting the needs emotionally, physically, economically, and mentally of veterans when they come home. These numbers indeed highlight a troubling reality that too many veterans are struggling to access the benefits they rightly have earned. Every veteran has earned the right to the benefits and services that they've earned, but far too many have not claimed them simply because they're unaware they exist and they don't know where to begin. That's precisely why that this week's conversation with my friend Cory Gold is essentially and timely important. He's an Army veteran whose life changed forever after a parachute failure left him with a broken back and a traumatic brain injury, and despite qualifying for disability benefits, he spent 4 years unaware that these benefits even existed. Rather than allowing that experience to define him, he used it as fuel and as a catalyst for founding Worth the Wait. It's a nonprofit dedicated to finding the veterans that the system overlooked and providing them with the benefits they've earned completely free of charge. During our conversation, Cory explains why VA disability benefits are not charity but compensation that veterans have earned. We also tackle the barriers that exist, which are preventing many veterans from accessing the benefits they've earned. The frustration of navigating the VA claims process, and why no veteran should have to face this journey alone. He also explains how Worth Their Wait works in practice, the programs they offer, and why it's important to also curate a community of support throughout this entire process. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how you're advocating for benefits for veterans through Worth Your Wait, my friend. Great to see you, and happy Wednesday to you.
Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday.
Absolutely. Now, just before we dive into your important work, I thought it would be smart to tell people why it's important to advocate for veterans benefits, because under the current administration, a lot of things are going by the wayside, and sadly, veterans benefits are on that list, my friend. So Just as a Kickstarter, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, the current state of Veterans Affairs, because if you look at the Veteran Affairs Department, there are certainly some gaps in services that need to be addressed. So I'm curious to get your 360-degree view about the current state of veteran services as it stands today, my friend.
Well, Kevin, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I am not. I don't work with the VSO. I'm not. Excuse me. I'm not. I don't work with the VA. I'm not part of the VA. The way I try to explain to people kind of where's our role in this whole process. We're kind of the Uber, right? Uber, they don't employ any drivers. They just connect the drivers to the passengers that need a ride. So I like to think that's kind of what we are. We are not the VA. We're not associated with the VA. We are the vehicle that gets the veterans not only to the VA to get their claims filed, but also to help them navigate that entire journey from beginning to end. But that's not the question you asked. The question you asked was why. So back in 2016, it was, let's see, yeah, February of 2016, I'll make sure I get my date right. I was making my way through airborne school on my way to Ranger selection. I had a contract to have an opportunity to be selected for one of the special operations fighting forces for the United States. And right before that selection, I had a really bad parachuting accident. I broke my back and I had a traumatic brain injury. And shortly after that event, I wound up being honorably discharged from the military. And I was just left so lost and not knowing what to do. And I actually spent 4 years trying to figure out kind of what to do next, hopping from, job to job, trying to figure out what to do next. And I had no idea that VA benefits even existed. I had no idea that there was healthcare, that there was, compensation for certain individuals with injuries or conditions resulting from their military service. And it wasn't until I met a fellow service member who told me about the VA benefits and helped me get in the right direction to get those. But there was a time right after my daughter was born and this was about just over a year ago, right after my daughter was born, that I went into a really, really deep depression. And I wouldn't have made it without my family. Long story short, is I wouldn't have made it without my family. And to help getting me through, and my wife advocating for me and helping me get on the proper medications, because I had a lot of conditions that were the result of that head injury. And it clicked for me that there are other veterans out there who don't have the same support and resources that I do, that are going through a similar battle, and they're going through it alone. And I knew that, much like myself, for those 4 years after I got out, I knew that there was either a gap in them knowing about the VA and the services that can help them get back on their feet, or there was just, as you know, or as you would imagine, somebody who's that deep in the hole from whether it be PTSD or whatever they're getting out of the military with, or whatever demons they're fighting. You can't pick yourself up by your bootstraps and go in to the VA to file your claim, right? It's physically impossible. You can't get yourself up out of bed certain days. You can't get yourself to take a shower certain days. How are you supposed to be expected to go out and advocate for yourself? So that's where this comes from. It is at no cost to the veteran. We are actually going out, finding those veterans and bringing them to their benefits that they're entitled to. And again, it's completely donor based. So there's no cost. There are services similar to this that cost a significant amount of money to the veteran. We are absolutely cost free. But yeah, that's us in a nutshell, and why we got founded. We are brand spanking new though, and just getting started, but it's going well. We have about 10 veterans right now in in our pipeline and gaining more every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cory, I'm curious to ask you about connecting authentically with veterans because throughout this process, and I know that you are a veteran yourself, you know, uh, connection is the art of making progress in anything in relationship building. So I'm curious to ask you about authentically connecting with veterans and the importance of building a sense of a stable community of support and understanding. And what are veterans telling you about how they're needing these services? Obviously, America is still in a current war, and when you come home from war, you need to be supported. So I'm curious about the authentic lens of this story and what veterans are telling you and what you know from your own personal experience about the value of building community, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
That's a great question because it's not all about getting connected with benefits, or it's not all about getting connected to compensation or the healthcare. Those two are enormously helpful, and they're quite literally life changing. I know they were for me. But a big part of it is, okay, well, once you're at that point, what do you do next? And we are building a community, like you said, of veterans who we're helping each other out. We're looking at, we're talking with veteran business owners who would be willing to hire folks. We're talking with other organizations that help veterans in one way. And instead of us all doing something different, finding ways to come together and see how we can use what services we offer to build a complete package. Or a great example is there's a program called the MASH program, and what the MASH program does is they get veterans connected with housing in multiple different ways. They offer rent vouchers for veterans. They I'm trying to remember. They've even they'll pay for like a lease so somebody can stay if they have an RV, so that they can stay in a park and have electricity and water and whatnot. Um, and that's a program that works directly with us, and we can go and we can say, hey, these veterans you're working with, let us help them get connected to their benefits. And they're able to come to us and say, hey, those veterans that are getting their benefits, if they don't have stable housing, we can help them bridge that gap until they can. And in so doing, building this community of not just organizations like us, not just the veterans that we help, but also people who just want to be there to support. And it's really cool. Our social media has been blowing up faster than I thought. We've gained like almost 1,000 Facebook followers in the past couple of months. So people are excited about what we're doing, and they wanna join the mission, and they want to help in any way they can. And we had a veteran we talked with that we're working with right now, and that's what we told him is there something in the Army, you have battle buddies, and I'm sure there's something similar in other branches, but your battle buddy, that's the one that you're responsible for, and that's the one that you make sure is okay no matter what. And that's what we try to encourage from our veterans too, is hey, you got to have a battle buddy, and we'll be your battle buddy as you go through this process, and we'll make sure that you have what you need and that you have the support that you need.
Yeah, and Corey, I'm also curious to ask you about what you think the concept of inclusion and acceptance is for veterans, because I believe on a surface level that people really want to support veterans if they really they know the background story of why it's important to support veterans. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what does the concept of inclusion and acceptance mean for veterans today in today's modern society, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, you mentioned something in that question, and that people want to help you, they want to support veterans. And um, I, what's interesting is, as far as acceptance and inclusion, a lot of times it's not about people accepting veterans who, people accepting them from an outside's perspective, right? For, accepting a person, it's about the veteran accepting themselves and accepting the fact that, hey, when I came out of the military, things are different now. And I'm speaking from experience. Like, things are different now because of what I went through, or because of what we went through, that veteran goes through. Maybe their brain works differently. It's not necessarily a body part. It's not necessarily a lost limb. It's not necessarily a broken back. A lot of the times, more often than not, it's mental.
Mhm.
And the VA recognizes that. The VA recognizes the mental toll that military service takes on somebody, and so they rate people accordingly. But the biggest challenge for me, and I know it's another challenge for veterans as well, is the fact that, hey, accepting the fact that, hey, I am not that same person, and I have to love myself and accept myself and appreciate the things that I can do now that I wasn't able to do before I went through everything that I did. Um, so, right, the biggest battle coming home is not necessarily physical; it's mental. Um, and I do everything that I can to be as open about my own ratings and my own mental health treatment and the medications that I take and the treatment that I've sought out, in hopes that other veterans can say, okay, hey, I can help myself too,
Yeah,
and I can accept myself for who I am now.
yeah, absolutely. And Cory, I'm curious, Travis. I'm going to ask you about what's your win in just a second, but I'm
Sure.
curious to ask you about the social isolation and the whole emotional toll of being a veteran that comes home. I have a disability. I was born with cerebral palsy, and sometimes I deal with social isolation and the fear of missing out on life after it's over. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you view overcoming isolation, and what do you think about the concept of resilience playing in trying to solve that puzzle? I'm curious to get your answer there.
It's so easy, especially today, and it's not just an issue with people with disabilities, or with veterans in particular. It's everybody. I think we're more isolated now than we've ever been. And that's not just my thoughts. That's from what I've read, and that's from research. We are more connected than ever, but we are also more isolated than ever. The fact that I can sit here and do an interview with you is amazing, across the country. Excuse me, across internationally. We're able to communicate, and we're able to have these talks. However, we are still more isolated than ever, because it's so easy to just escape into, whether it's your cell phone, or with young men, a lot of times it's video games, or pornography. You name it. There's all different kinds of ways to isolate yourself. um, and it's very easy, right? When you're depressed, when you are too anxious to be able to go out and meet people, or to put yourself out there. But the reality is that humans are social creatures, and we have been ever since we started standing up, right? We were walking on two legs. We're social creatures. We have to socialize in order to survive. And so, when it comes to resilience, there's only so much you can do by yourself. And I mentioned this before in the very beginning. If I didn't have my wife, I wouldn't be alive today, because I wouldn't have had somebody to just pick me up and keep going. And I think about that all the time. I think about that all the time, because again, not everybody has those resources. So, I feel like a lot of mental health advocates, and they'll say, go out, seek help, seek support, and that's often the times the message: seek support. Um, I kind of flip that on its head, and I say, hey, if you notice that your friend, your buddy, your battle buddy, your family member, your whatnot is acting a little different, or they're a little bit more removed than they have typically been, I say it's up to you to reach out to them. Because when you're in that headspace, you're just in survival mode, and you're not able to go out and actively, proactively seek ways to help yourself. You need somebody or people to come and pick you up. Um, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, getting back to your Ballywake and why you started this in the first place, and I'm curious to ask you specifically about worth their weight and the work that you're doing to connect people with the next phase of life. And I know primarily you help them navigate the benefits process, but I'm curious about how you think about evolving the organization, helping veterans navigate their next chapter after they get the benefits they're entitled to. What are your thoughts there?
Seriously, these are great questions. I'm so glad you're asking me this because, like we said, like it doesn't stop when somebody receives their money or their back pay or their health care. What do those things do? They are tools and they are ways to be able to heal. When I'm not having to worry about just making rent or feeding myself and my family, and I've got a little bit of extra money coming in to be able to take that burden off, it then opens me up to be able to seek treatment and to heal and to take the time that I need to, and when I say I mean any veteran, right? To take the time that I need to move on and to figure out what's next in my life. Because I think unfortunately a lot of folks kind of treat it like welfare and they say, okay, well I got my money, like my bills are paid. I'm calling it a day. And that's not the case. Where we as a veteran, you signed up because you wanted to be a part of something bigger and you wanted to have a sense of purpose. And you've got to find that again, whatever that looks like. And that doesn't have to be military related or even, paramilitary. I spent a lot of time, I was, maybe I'll be a police officer next. Maybe I'll be a firefighter, something similar to that, sense of brotherhood and camaraderie. But what it has all led me to is this, where I'm working with other veterans to get them the same relief that I got. And I want that for other veterans too. What's your next step? Like, how do we find what really starts a light in your belly instead of, okay, well, I've got to do this job to survive. Okay, well, you've got a little extra money now. So you're surviving. What are we going to do next? Maybe that looks like starting a business that you didn't have time to start before. Or maybe that looks like learning a new skill or trying out in a new field or doing an apprenticeship or whatever. So it's enormous blessing to be able to receive those VA benefits because then you can really find out, okay, what do I want to give back to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And, doing my research on this organization and yourself personally, you say that one thing that really stood out to you was the belief that the VA systems, rather, are fundamentally reactive instead of, proactive in terms of providing services. So I'm curious, what parts of the system do you think are reactive? Where do you think the bottlenecks can be alleviated, and how did that contribute to you wanting to start this worth your weight initiative, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so there's this, there's kind of two phases. Right? I'm being overly simplistic with it. There's two phases. There's pre-benefits and there's post-benefits, right? So I'm not receiving anything. So I'll use myself as an example. It's pre-2020. I'm not receiving benefits. I'm, going job to job. I'm not able to make rent. I'm struggling, right? And then there's, hey, I've got my VA benefits now. I'm able to go seek treatment. I got free health care through the VA. I'm getting a check every month, tax free. This is an enormous relief. It's everything in the middle. So the VA actually does a really good job of treating patients, and every VA is different, and every region is different. So that's the caveat. But I will say that the ones that I have had the pleasure to interact with, especially in Tennessee, are really doing a wonderful job. I mean, I've been able to have acupuncture, chiropractor, I see a psychiatrist, I see a primary care, and this is completely cost free for me. And they do a really good job at making sure I get the care that I need. So in that way, all of those systems are proactive. It's everything in the middle. It's the, hey, how does this person get access to their health records? How do they get access to their DD-214 if they don't have it? How do they know what to file for? How do they, in some cases, how do they get to their appointments? How do they even know what to do? So there's this middle ground that I was stuck in for so many years that can so easily be alleviated with just a little bit of information and a little bit of assistance from some entity. So that's where Worth Their Weight comes in, is we offer an Uber ride if somebody can't make it to their appointment. We seek out way, if somebody doesn't have a place to live, we connect with an organization so that we can get them access to somewhere to stay while they're waiting to get those checks. Because there's also a big gap after you file and before you get your benefits, where there's that waiting period, right? Where either you're waiting to get good news from the VA, or that they come back and they don't give you, the rating or that you were expecting, or that you felt you were entitled to, and you have to keep on doing that fight, and it can take months and months and months. So it's easy to fall off the wagon and to disappear during that time, or to give up. And we wanted to make sure to proactively reach out to those individuals in that time and say, hey, we're going to meet every week or bi-weekly or whatever, to make sure that they have whatever papers they need, that we're able to file any extra claim, or whatever that looks like. We want to make sure that all those bottlenecks, like you said, are removed in the middle. And so we're learning every day that there are more that pop up every day, and we always find ways to overcome them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cory, before I ask you about the programs that Worth Your Weight offers, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this question. Why do you think it's important for veterans to give themselves permission to cry and share emotions, my friend?
I mean, scientifically, it's a fantastic release of cortisol. I mean, that cortisol, that stress hormone, it builds up. And sometimes if you're able to let yourself just let that out, it can be such an enormous relief. So that's my scientific reason. But just from, you asked before about a community and camaraderie, there's an enormous amount of connection that you have with somebody if you can share your experience. And obviously it can be difficult for someone who's a vet, because they feel like they can feel maybe their experience is unique, or it's unlike any, what a civilian's gone through. So having that community of other fellow veterans, just to be able to talk and to reminisce on some of the best, worst days of your life, when you were in the suck, or when you were really just about and feel that again. It can be very cathartic for folks, especially if they've spent a lot of time out of the military and they haven't been around other veterans. It can be good to be. It doesn't matter what age. I'll hang out with Vietnam veterans, and we still, even though it was so many years before I did my service, there's that sense of us going through similar events and similar things, whether it be training or what have you. And obviously, I'm not comparing my experience to those vets, but what I love about every veteran that I've talked to, especially folks who have been to war, because I never deployed, I never went to war, I never fought, I never made it to that point. And before, I used to express that to other vets who had, and they'd say, you know what, a veteran's a veteran. Doesn't matter what happened to you, it doesn't matter what you did. You raised your hand and you chose to go and do this, and to go and serve your country. And everybody, all of those veterans deserve respect. And that's something that I've had to learn over the years, is to let yourself be a vet. Let yourself be in a position where you did give that sacrifice. And just because you didn't lose a limb, and just because you didn't get shot or what have you, doesn't make you any less of a vet than the one who did. It's just different circumstances. Yeah, and being in it's important to open up that space to allow veterans to show that. However, it's also okay to respect, like, some people just don't feel comfortable um, showing emotions that way, and some people show emotions differently. And I not everybody expresses them the same. And I think allowing people to express themselves in their own way or choose not to express themselves, either one is okay, but making sure that the space, whatever space that you're opening up, is inclusive and is non-judgmental. And it's easy to say those things. It's much more difficult to actually foster that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, I'm curious about what's their way, your mission statement, and I know it has two programs. So talk to me about the mission statement and the two programs. I know that one is still currently under development, but tell me about the nuts and bolts of the company and why it's important for people to know about it, my friend.
Absolutely. So our first program, Operation Search and Rescue, that's the one that I've been talking about mostly. That's our pilot, that getting the veteran from the point where they have a disability as a result of their military service, getting them from that point to being rated for that disability so that they're being compensated. They're having, multiple things: compensation, access to healthcare, access to rehabilitation programs. That's Operation Search and Rescue. The other big thing is, you mentioned something before where you said, America's still at war, which unfortunately we are. But it's not just those soldiers coming home, it's the ones who've been home for decades, who have been cast aside, who have been forgotten. That's the majority of the people that we work with right now, um, are those folks. And a lot of them are older, 60, 70 plus. A lot of them are not used to using technology. And a lot of these platforms and systems require you to be proficient with technology. For example, even the VA, everything with the VA is online. I can have a video conference with my doctor. I can order medications. I can see where my claim is. I can see it all. It's very robust. It's a very complicated and well developed system. However, you still have to know how to use it. Same thing with stuff like job searching. Like, you don't look for jobs in the newspaper anymore. You look for
Yeah.
them on platforms like Indeed or LinkedIn. And so currently under development is the Vet Connect program, which is, if a veteran doesn't have a device, getting them access to a easily usable device. So that's step one. But then also teaching how to use that device, and then use any application that is necessary for just existence as a human being, right? So, like, for a veteran, that's the VA app. That probably, if somebody's unemployed, that also looks like, an app like Indeed, knowing how to submit an application, knowing how to, if you don't have a vehicle, book a ride with Uber. Like, there's so many things that we can do, and that gets unlocked once you have their benefits. But um, you have to know how to have access to it. So there's so many things, and that's another part of the proactivity, right? Is it's a one thing for the VA to offer all these wonderful benefits. It's another thing to actually show veterans how to use them. And so that is what we have under pilot right now, Operation Vet Connect. Hoping to have that rocking and rolling sometime in the next 30 to 60 days. And ideally be able to do it, since this is a national organization, be able to do it nationally and deliver any sort of instruction remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Corey, my next two questions are research based. So stick with me for a second. So
Sure.
research published through the National Library of Medicine says that between 33 and 41% of veterans patients experience mental health behavioral adjustments after they come home from war or the mission that they've been assigned to, my friend. And to your point, most of them don't even seek treatment because they don't even know it exists, my friend. So I'm curious when you talk about mental health and things like post-traumatic stress disorder. What are your thoughts on the findings that between 31 or 33 and 41% deal with mental health concerns? And how do you think we can close the gap when it comes to awareness so that more veterans know about the benefits that they're entitled to? What are your thoughts there?
I'm very. This is very close to home to me because like I lived this. I was that statistic that didn't seek out help. Um, because disabling PTSD isn't a thing. It isn't something you can suck up. You can't seek treatment when you can't seek a shower, when you can't seek getting out of bed. You can't just seek treatment. It's not that simple. It seems like it should be. It's just not. Mentally, you're incapable of doing something like that. The symptoms are so crippling and genuinely disabling. Um, so I think society just misses that. I think if you've never lived that, the whole concept of why can't you just, if you're suffering for all these things, like there's phone numbers to call, you can dial 988, this veterans crisis line. There's numbers to dial. There's things you can do. There's resources out there. Like how are there people that are still suffering when there's all these resources out there? And you just can't. It's because there's a disconnect. You're not able to go out and seek those resources. It seems like climbing, summiting the tallest mountain when you can't even walk 10 steps. So the waiting game fails. The waiting for vets to come and seek treatment, that's not working. Obviously, like you said, 30 to 40%. Frankly, I'm surprised the numbers aren't higher for people who have post traumatic stress. So what you asked, how do we bridge that gap? I think it's multiple ways. I think it's partially what we're doing, where we are going out and we're finding those veterans. We are not literally, but knocking on their door and saying, "Hey, come with us. We're going to help you get where you need to be." Of course, as long as they wanted it. We're never forcing anybody. And the other thing is the awareness. Just like you mentioned, is just recognizing the fact that those numbers are real. That mental health is a legitimate. It's mental health. It's just like anything else. If you're sick, you have to get better.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the flu, you should stay home and you should rest and you should get treatment. If you have post traumatic stress, if you have depression, you got to get better. And that's something that my father actually told me because I had a really hard time with that. I had a really hard time with not just picking myself up by my bootstraps and go, felt like a failure, felt like I was failing my wife, my daughter, my family. And that's the advice he gave to me was, buddy, if you had the flu, would you go to the gym? And the answer is no, absolutely not. So if you're suffering from this stuff, you need to get care, and it's not on you; it's on the people who are around you to recognize that and to be that shoulder to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, here's the second research question I wanted to ask you. According to data from the National Institute of Health, they report that out of the Veterans Affairs Department, they report that nearly 30% of U.S. veterans report living with a disability, something I know that you have experience with doing. And among those veterans using VA healthcare, a significant portion of them or percentage of them have a disability rating or higher than 50, and most have one closer to 100. So I'm curious, living with a disability yourself and me having one, I'm curious to get your perspective on, disability services and how they can be improved and impacted by advocacy. And what do you want people to know about the quality of disability services across America for veterans today?
I can only so the interesting part of the VA is although it's a national organization, it's funded nationally. There's a line item for the VA. Every VA, all the regions are different. and I got out in 2016. So I got out and started seeking my benefits in 2020, long after. Um, tell me my internet is unstable. Can you still hear me okay, Kevin?
Yeah, you cut out there for a second, but
Oh,
yeah, we were talking about the importance of people knowing about the quality of disability services through
yes.
VA. What are your thoughts, my friend?
I can tell you that the VAs, because I've lived in a couple different states. So I've lived in Tennessee, which is Tennessee Valley Healthcare System, VA healthcare system, and then I also lived in Florida, which was part of, I can't remember, some southeast system. They were two very different experiences. However, I can tell you that both of those systems had ex had and still have excellent healthcare providers, um, and mental health care providers that genuinely want the best for their patients. Um, so as far as the care goes that I've received, again, just in those two regions, and I can't speak to any other regions, it's been nothing short of excellent. I like I said, I have access to medications I need. I was able to seek therapy when that was part of my journey. Um, it's been a really great experience, and I think part of the access to that is veterans just need to trust the VA again, because there was a time when you didn't trust the VA, and for good reason. I mean, there people were having issues. It took forever to get in, if you to get an appointment, and they've made a huge turnaround. So frankly, I don't think a lot of improvements in that area in terms of the healthcare that's provided. I don't see that they're necessary. Of course, it's always good to keep to keep improving. However, I think the real gap is the access, because again, you have to have a rating.
Hmm.
So even if a veterans is listening and they're not rated, if they wanted to go and get VA healthcare, they wouldn't be able to until they have a rating. And once you hit that 50% mark, you are considered priority one, which means that anytime that you need care, you're able to get in. I can't remember the exact the specifics of it, but basically, if you need healthcare, you're going to get healthcare. For example, there's been a couple of times where I had to go to the emergency room, for um, some conditions that I was suffering from as a result of my disabilities, and the VA sent me. They made sure I got there. So that gap in service, I think the gap is not there. I think the gap is in, like we talked about before, knowing about the benefits and knowing to go and seek them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Corey, I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're interconnected. You also talk about a message about starting this organization to service the veterans that the system has missed, my friend. And I'm also curious to get your thoughts on, having veterans know about, a lot of veterans know about the services they've earned, but a lot of them are sometimes hesitant to take advantage of them. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the whole notion of serving the veterans that the system has missed, and the importance of veterans knowing that they should seek the services that they've earned. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I think there's multiple reasons why, because I do encounter veterans who are not, don't have a rating. They know about VA benefits and they choose not to pursue them. And it's not as rare as you would think. And there's a few reasons for that I've heard. One of them is the implication that VA benefits are a handout, or are some sort of a, as it's you're taking money from the government. I'm fine. I don't need it. Save it for somebody else. Like, I don't need handouts from the government. It's just not the case. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the reality. It's a way, as my as a close family friend of mine says, when the army breaks you, they have to buy you. So it's a way for them to help compensate for the issues that you got out of the military with that you didn't go in with, because you shouldn't have to face that alone after everything you did. So that's a big part of it. Is, oh, I don't need it. Save it for the next guy. And
Yeah.
what I say to that is, oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I say to that is, first of all, there's plenty to go around. There is a mass. I can't remember what it was. It was a massive, mind-boggling number that the federal government sets aside for veterans. It's an enormous number. There's plenty of money to go around. By you going and seeking your VA benefits, you're not somehow taking it from the next guy who needs it more. That's not real. That's a fallacy. Um, Another thing is, like we talked about before, a distrust, especially from older vets, of the VA, because it used to be a very broken system, and it's a lot of things are fixed now. And I think that education of, hey, things are better now, come and give them a try again. Like they've improved a lot since the 80s and 90s. So I think that those are the two main, what would you call them? The two things that are keeping vets from seeking out these benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, you said that receiving benefits isn't the finish line, but just the beginning, my friend, or a
Yes,
starting point, and receiving compensation may provide them with financial stability, but there are also other reasons to seek benefits like purpose and identity. So, talk to me about the idea of benefits and receiving benefits only being a starting point, because I know you believe that there's more to the story, isn't there?
absolutely. And it is it's not the end, it's the beginning. Because I spoke a little bit about this before. Once you have that financial strain and pressure alleviated off you, once you've got, I'll use, let's say, even a couple $1,000 tax free per month that can pay for your rent and utilities. And once those bills are met and you've got the healthcare that you need, you can actually take the time to say, okay, let's take a breath. Let's take a step back. Let's take stock on how I'm doing and figure out what actual treatment I need to take. Because I spent many years where, totally fine mentally. Yeah, I woke up 10 times a night from nightmares, but that's just part of the game. My back hurts all the time, but hey, that's just part of it. That's normal. Once you're able to really sit down and say, hey, these things aren't normal, and I need to get help for these because they're having a significant negative impact on my life. Once you're actually able to go and seek treatment for those, oh my goodness, it's like you wear glasses. It's like when you first time you put on your glasses, right? You see everything's, oh, the colors get so much crisper. The world just is so much more vibrant. That's how it feels when you're able to actually go out and figure out how to heal and how to take that next step. And for me, one of those next steps was I was actually able to go through a program funded by the VA called the Vet Tech program. I was able to become a software engineer so that I can work from home and live my dream of traveling with my wife and daughter. And that's all because of the VA. That's all from the programs that they offered. And I get a little emotional about it because it's such a difference between how I was and how I am now. Like
Mhm.
it's like my life wasn't even really fully able to begin until I accepted, hey, this is how my body is now. It's not the way it used to be. This is how my brain is now. It's not the way it used to be, but it's beautiful in different ways. And I'm able to do a lot of really good things. And we're just getting started, right? So this is what I have chosen to do. But I've worked with veterans who, like I said, they go on to start businesses or they want to start businesses and they're able to have that they're able to have that income so that they can actually go out and achieve their dream of starting a business or starting a new job or a new trade or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and Corey, I'm curious to round out our conversation by asking you to go back to those 4 years that you said that you've spent in the dark, sort of finding yourself, and what you learned about yourself personally, and what would be your parting message for any veteran watching this, and they sort of identifying with a conversation or with your story in particular, and they say to themselves, "I identify with this, but I really need a closing message of inspiration or of guidance on actions to take about how important it is to ask for help." What are your thoughts there, my friend?
The first thing I would say is if part of you is wondering whether you qualify, this is your sign. Give us a call. Seriously. So that step one, give us a call. 833 WTW vets. And if you're, that's a toll free number, and we'll take those first steps with you. But if you're not quite ready for that, I totally get it. I get it 100%. There was a time where I wasn't ready to take those steps either. So what I would say is if something is keeping you, if you're suffering from some condition or disability that you got in the military and something's keeping you from seeking out treatment, seeking out help, remember that it's not just you going through it. It's your family as well. And you owe it to the people that love you to take care of yourself and to treat yourself with the love and respect that you deserve, because that's what the people that love you want. And by not taking care of yourself, by not treating yourself, you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting the ones around you. So take those steps, get better. I promise it's better on the other side. It's scary. It's different. That acceptance of yourself for who you are now, that's scary. That's a scary step to take, but it's incredibly rewarding on the other side. And we would love to have you. So I think that's what I would tell them, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Cory, I end all my podcast by asking about personal and professional legacy. But for you, I want to ask it a slightly different way. I'm curious, if I asked you to write the first line of your own eulogy about the work that you're doing to service veterans, how do you want that line to read, my friend? And how do you think the work that you're doing also impacts in your personal life as well? What are your thoughts there?
That's such a great question, because I've thought about it. I've thought about what do I want people to say when I die. I can't remember if that was a Stephen Covey or Tony Robbins. I can't remember who it was, but how do you want people to what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? And I want them to say that Cory, he laughed heartily, he loved deeply, and he cared deeply, and he gave generously to others. And that is what this program, that is the legacy I want to leave behind, is how can I give back as much as I can, and how can I make sure that no veteran gets forgotten the way that I was. And even if we can just help one person, right, then this whole thing was absolutely worth it. But my goal is that there is no gap that we talked about before, where we were talking about what's the gap between having benefit or not having benefits and having them. We remove that. We get rid of the information. We get rid of the industry of people, charging thousands of dollars to get veterans connected to their benefits. This is just something that happens when you get out of the military. You figured out which ways, you need a little extra assistance, and you go and you seek those out. End of story. So that's what I think that answers the question. But yeah, for a pithy answer, Cory Gold, he laughed heartily, he gave generously, and he loved deeply.
Absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me, if people want to get connected with Walter Wade or yourself personally, what's the best way they can do that?
Absolutely. So the first thing is give us a call. If you want to give us a call, 833 WTW vets. You can also check us out on our website, which is WTWvets.org. It's WTWVETS.org. That'll take you to our website where you can not only find ways to get connected with us, but also learn if you want to stand in this fight with us and help us support. We are running our first annual charity ruck march in September. It's going to be based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but people can do it wherever they are. It's going to be all weekend long. You can pledge your miles, you can fundraise on behalf of the organization, and we're just going to have a really good time in September. So however you want to get involved, there are ways. Check us out on Facebook. We're on Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. We're very active on socials. And feel free to reach out. Shoot me a DM. Give us a call. And if you just want to talk, or I think my email is also on the website as well. So anybody that wants to get in touch or just chat, you're welcome to reach out as well.
Well, Cory, as I mentioned at the onset of our conversation, I believe that you're redefining inclusion and acceptance for
Thank you.
veterans, one veteran at a time, my friend. And I think you're doing remarkably important and meaningful work. It was a real pleasure to engage in a conversation with you this afternoon, and I want to thank you for being here. It's most appreciated.
It's an honor to be here talking with you, and what you just said is such an enormous compliment. I'm beside myself. Thank you.